Okay, welcome to this week's episode of Hashtag Leadership, What's on Your Mind, a podcast to make you stop and think about your leadership journey by bringing amazing guests on with amazing stories and experts in their field. So it was a very special episode today because it's exactly a year since we started. So there's a lot of other very special moments by having our guests on today. Peter, how are you doing, Peter? You okay?
Very well, thank you, Stuart. Yes, I'm looking forward to this.
So the reason I mention it's the year because Peter was on one of the first people on my list a year ago when I was looking at who I would have on the podcast, and for external reasons it just couldn't happen, and it's just probably fate that this has happened, that we can get you on for the 1 year anniversary. So thank you so much for your time. So Peter, I know you very well now. We're very good friends. We've been friends for about a year and a half, probably 2 years plus now, isn't it? So for people who don't know you, just introduce yourself. Tell us a little about who you are, what your background is, and why I've got you on the podcast.
Okay, well, thanks for that great introduction. Flattery will get you everywhere. That's a good start. Yes, Peter Anstiss, and have an engineering background. I did a graduate apprenticeship with the then British Aircraft Corporation, which shows how old I am, which became British Aerospace and subsequently BAE Systems. So aerospace and defence has been the sort of at the core of what I've done in industry. But I kind of migrated from engineering roles into international business development. And for the last half of my career, I've led teams, often quite complex teams of industrial, military, political sort of components in global defence sales. So harnessing UK PLC and some of our partners around Europe in particular to sell defence equipment abroad. So that's been something that characterises the work that I've done. But in terms of how I've gone about it, I think we'll turn to this shortly. But I've also learned a lot about leadership along the way. I've learned a lot about the sort of so-called work-life balance. I'm commenting to you in a previous conversation about how coming up to a 40th wedding anniversary shortly, so we must have done something right. But more seriously, I think I have learned about how leadership has changed, and so from a personal point of view, this is a great opportunity to discuss that further. I think just sort of outside that work career, I've maintained an interest in engineering related topics. So I restore old racing cars and compete in them. I'm very proud of 2 kids and now the grandchildren and so on. And also I've been working quite hard in the last couple of years to restore a grade 2 listed farmhouse and cottage in the the intersection of the national parks of Cumbria, the Lake District and the Yorkshire Dales. So quite a lot on. Just a final piece of that background, post full-time work in retirement, I joined the board of a regional bank and building society. I've done some consulting work, and I found that the most sort of, the place where I'm most at home is in the coaching and personal development and basically using my experience to help others realise their full potential.
Yeah, amazing. And before I forget to mention as well that you are part of our team at Star Development as well, which is by this point will be completely open, and it's great to have you as part of the team to give that credibility as well. So yeah. Hashtag leadership, what's on your mind? You've mentioned leadership a couple of times. What comes to your mind when you just hear the term leadership?
Okay, well, I think from my perspective, I would define it as the ability to realize the full potential of individuals, teams, businesses, and to sort of use one's personal skills to really sort of get the best out of others. And I think that's the thing which differentiates leadership from simple, I say simple, but management, let's say. I think having those skills which get people to want to deliver for you and for the business in which they work or for their customers or whatever, to get them to want to do that as an inspirational leader, it's a very rewarding thing if you can pull off that trick. But to get them to want to do that rather than doing it under duress,
Yeah.
being kind of for fear of failure almost, that's why they come to work and sort of work hard, but actually they're not enjoying it, or they're not sort of delivering naturally, they're coerced into delivery. I want to create an environment under the banner leadership where people really want to deliver because they enjoy it and they're committed and they respect that sort of
Yeah.
leadership at the helm.
Amazing. Excellent. So staying with you personally, we always dig into your leadership past. So whether it's on reflection or whether there was a light bulb moment, where do you think your leadership journey started? How far are we going back?
Okay, well, I think with hindsight, I think it started very early on as I came out of a sort of a graduate training program, went into, a career in the aerospace and defense industry, and started to have people reporting to me. Then inevitably I had a leadership responsibility then, but I didn't really think of it as leadership. I thought of it as probably management. If I look back even further, we all aspired, I guess, to be leaders of our sports teams, captain of the rugby, cricket or football or whatever it was. But we never thought of that as a leadership role, really. We just thought of it as being picked because we were slightly better than all the other lot that were having a go at this sort of thing. So if I'm honest, it came fairly late to me, the real recognition. And it was probably when, as part of then British Aerospace, a global leadership program was launched, which was a massive initiative. So this is a company of 100,000 people operating in 60 countries, of which 6 or 8 had more than 8,000 employees. And a program was put together to bring the senior leadership of the company, as we were tagged then, to learn how to do some of those things I referred to previously, create empathy, develop your own personal sort of gravitas and brand almost, inspire people to really work hard and to deliver for you and for themselves and from the company and so on. And so there was a very structured program, a very elaborate, very expensive, frankly, program, because leadership was recognized as being perhaps the most important attribute that was needed in the senior team of the company.
Amazing. Awesome. So there's so many things that I want to try and fit into this 20 minutes. So one of the things that has happened over the last year, which has been amazing, is about my love for storytelling, bringing amazing people on, experts in their field, and just giving them that space to share that story. So we met up for a coffee, didn't we, on the way to one of my workshops when I did some associate work. And it just happened that that workshop was storytelling. And we had a chat and a conversation, and you shared some really interesting facts about how you'd use storytelling. Because at that point, it was quite new to me. In the military, we didn't really label it storytelling. It was a new thing that I was like, I don't really know what this is going to turn into. But that turned out to be one of my favorite topics that I delivered. So tell us a little bit about your experience about using storytelling and why you used it.
Okay, well, in the particular example I think I gave to you, this is when we met near Preston, actually, just off the M6, wasn't it, in the Tickle Trap. In that particular sort of explanation I gave then, I was referring to an occasion where I was wheeled out by the chief executive of the business to host groups of employees in sort of multiples of 1,500, 2,000 at a time, I guess, in a large hangar, and talk them through some strategic changes which were to be implemented in the business, and opportunities that the business faced also, but really to sort of introduce them to the business plan, their contribution towards it, and the expectation of, our shareholders, our customers, and the senior management of the business. But I didn't want to stand up and give some sort of PowerPoint presentation. So I took some advice. I got some expertise. I tracked down some expertise actually in London, where I learned about storytelling as a tool to get the message across. And although underlying this is always going to be that slightly hard-nosed, tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them, and make sure it's sunk in, there's always got to be some of that. The reality was we could gift wrap it in a form which made it interesting, compelling, personal. It made you put a fair bit of yourself, had to be put into it. It became quite personal. I spoke, I remember, quite emotionally about sitting in Delhi airport, tucked up in India at 3 a.m., knowing I've got to come home, do all my domestic things with the kids and family and so on. I've got to be back in Delhi on the Wednesday or something. And I'm thinking, why am I doing this and what's it for? And then, beyond that, I was able to translate that into, but there's a massive business imperative for doing this, that 100,000 jobs around Europe, perhaps, this was promoting the Eurofighter Typhoon program, could be dependent on it. And so I use storytelling with the advice from the specialist as a means of both getting people's attention, of taking them on this sort of journey, I hesitate to use the word, but journey through my own experiences, and leaving them with a pretty clear impression that their role was important, that it was going to feel different, that they were highly valued, and without them working really hard alongside everyone else, both as individuals and as teams, this business was not imperiled, that's the wrong word, but wasn't going to realize its full potential. Only they could deliver it.
Yeah.
And it worked, and I got some good feedback. And frankly, I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, amazing. Another tool to your... Yeah, and I was just thinking then, it kind of, storytelling, it reminded me then when you explained it, that it adds so many layers of communication. It adds purpose, it adds understanding of what's going on. Like, say, if you just do that, tell people what they need to do, it's the robot thing, isn't it? Like, they become more attached to what the reason why you're telling them to do something is.
I think the other thing I'd add to that, Stuart, is that an important component of it is to really understand your audience. And I know that's often stated, but really understand the audience. So on a one-to-one basis, we can actually explore what it is that motivates an individual. We can look at how they need the carrot rather than the stick, perhaps, to motivate them, or perhaps it's the other way around sometimes. But you can, on a one-to-one basis, you can explore what an individual is driven by, and then adapt the message to make sure it hits the right spot. When you've got 1,500, 2,000 people in front of you, you've got to think, well, what is the sort of key element of what I'm going to say here? Is it going to land? Is it going to be accepted, and so on? Am I going to come across as too informal, patronizing, too directing, too detailed, So you really have to invest the time up front to think, if I was in the audience, what would it feel like? And so that was another component of the sort of lessons I learned. And so preparation was key in that respect.
Yeah. And also, like, making yourself change your perspective, like you just said, if you were in the audience. And yeah, awesome, excellent. So on prepping for you to come on, we've had a couple of conversations, and I would love...
You're giving the impression to anyone who might be watching this that we've done some preparation. Go on.
I know, yes, I know. Well, we chat and more frequently recently.
Yeah.
So you've had some roles, and I'd love you to sort of explain what those roles are on a global status, and we're now delivering on a global status. We've got centres an opportunity to train over in Sweden, Spain, obviously the UK, wanting to go a bit further afield after another year maybe. Can we explore your thoughts about leadership, or the difference in leadership that you've experienced having roles outside the UK?
Yes. Firstly, let me take a really sort of complex sort of illustration, which I recognise is not going to be relevant to everyone, but is an extreme case of what I think you and I have discussed in the past. So if we're representing, as a leader, if I'm representing a consortium of companies, governments, militaries even, in this case a European collaborative program, and we're working in somewhere like Japan, seeking to sell them for 20 or 30 years, complex defence, aerospace and defence technologies and products. Getting that team to understand, work together, and really be sensitive to the Japanese culture is a really, really big part of the task. It isn't standing up and giving an impressive presentation in the way that we might in the UK. It's recognising that grey hairs and bald patches are an asset rather than, liability, as they can be in some markets. If I work in Japan, for example, then understanding that very unique culture is absolutely key to being accepted as a credible representative of a business or a consortium. Equally, if working in, say, the Middle East or Southeast Asia or Latin America or wherever, really researching what matters to the customer is going to be important, and then adapting accordingly and being brutal about it. You know, I've been involved in some real disasters, frankly, where I've engaged someone who's been a very credible person, perhaps from the UK, from either industry or military or whatever, and they've pitched up. I'll have to spare their blushes, but not mention the names, of course. But they've pitched up in and sort of this big audience in front of them, and they've come to give a presentation, and they've opened the presentation by saying, well, I'm a little bit disappointed by the seniority of the audience. I'm normally addressing, you know, sort of 3 stars and above in my briefings. So notwithstanding that, I'm prepared to carry on, you know. Now that goes down really well, as you can imagine. I mean, it's lost the entire audience and the whole trip's a big waste of time. So my observation is that culturally, around the world, things are very different. And I have that from another perspective as well, which, without labouring the point, I work as an honorary teaching fellow at the Lancaster University Management School, and on occasions I'm sort of wheeled out as, I think it's probably the students, to encourage them to sort of work hard and pass their exams, otherwise you're going to end up like this bloke sort of thing. But I go and stand at the front, there's 50 or 60 students, and they're from all over the world. And this is a really tricky one, because you're not homing in on the culture of Japan or Malaysia or Oman or, you know, Sweden. You're having to recognize that around the auditorium are people from 40 or 50 different nations with completely different backgrounds, completely different attention spans, used to talking at different distances. Some are offended if they see the bottoms of your sole of your shoes, you know. So looking at that audience and seeing how they respond, it's very easy to think, oh, crikey, I'm making a bit of a dog's breakfast. This chap's completely, you know, lost the plot, and this lady over here, not interested in the slightest. It could well be the case, but it's quite often a cultural difference, and being sensitive to that, and particularly when one-on-one afterwards, you know, you recognize where someone is from and their backgrounds and so on, being able to sort of adapt is quite important without losing your own personal identity. I don't mean put on an act or try and behave like someone else, but adapting your response and how style according to that audience and the individuals within it. It's very important in my experience.
Yeah, and again, I've been talking quite a lot recently about the power of having the addition to your toolbox of self-awareness, but also situational awareness, and that's exactly what you've just said. And that's situational awareness of all those things with culture, environments, people, and it can help, can't it? And it can hinder very quickly.
Yes, I mean, I think that starting with the negatives, I think if you get it wrong, you can immediately build up barriers. Worst case, cause offence. Get it right, and you can engage and be endearing and earn respect and so on. So, yeah, I think understanding the individuals and the collective or collection of people that you're addressing is absolutely vital. And in terms of personal perspective, I think there's no substitute for sitting down with a qualified person and really understanding your own personal drivers, whether you're one of these sort of hurry up types, as I am, a bit of an arm waver and outgoing, and, you know, or whether you're a deep thinker, analytical, a detailed person, whether you're a hard driver who, you know, uses the stick rather than the carrot and can only do that. You know, you can't, I mean, if we don't want to get political, but you couldn't think of 2 ends of the spectrum that are more different than, say, President Obama and subsequently President Trump. You know, these are 2 totally different individuals, totally different leadership styles, and, you know, each managed to get whatever it was, 60 million supporters. So, you know, they're very extreme. So you have to really identify what your own personal style and approach is going to be, and be genuine with it.
Yeah.
The only nuance on that I would add, if I may, is I think it's important in many jobs to be able to, on the one hand, have gravitas and substance, and on occasion be someone who you kind of establish your pedigree a bit and say, this is my broad experience. And yet on the other hand, you still have to be approachable, slightly endearing, very informal, if you want to be engaging with perhaps a young apprentice who you're acting as a mentor to. And I've literally gone from, presenting to a room full of defense ministers at a NATO conference or something, to having a 21-year-old undergraduate who's coming for a mentoring class. And adapting to that environment personally is rewarding if you can do it right, but it's actually quite tricky.
Yeah, amazing. So we have literally 1 minute left.
Oh, crikey.
It flies by. Could I put you on the spot and say, obviously the people who are watching this and listening to this are interested in leveling up their leadership, interested in leadership as a title. What are the 1-2 things that people you think can think about or action that can help them step forward?
Okay, well, I think one of the things that is helpful is if they think about a role model. Who do they find inspirational and endearing and engaging, and who they would, really work hard and be committed to, because of that leadership style works for them. So think of a role model. I would suggest that they also think of getting coaching and mentoring and help, because we readily go and get skills training, in detailed, could be materials technologies or production processes or telecommunications, whatever. We readily do that. We less often think about some of these issues, often regarded as, and I think it's the wrong term, but sort of softer issues of the mentoring, the coaching, and how to adapt and generate empathy and so on. And so think about proper training. And then I think my final observation would be just really spend some time and realize overall how important it is to have strong leadership. And whether that's political leadership, industrial leadership, military leadership, local authority leadership, whatever it is, wherever we turn in our daily lives, what we really want to see is effective leadership. Strong leadership, I tend to avoid the term sometimes if I can, if I remember to, because it tends to sound like pushy, robust, a la a Donald Trump, for example. Yeah. I'm talking about effective leadership, people who really do get people to realize, as individuals or teams, their full potential.
Yeah. Amazing. What a great way to finish. Thank you so much for that. So guys, I hope you really enjoyed that. If you're listening to us on your podcast provider, make sure you hit us a follow. I love to hear your takeaways from each and every one of our amazing guests that we have. If you're watching us on the YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe, hit the bell, and every Wednesday at 6 a.m. we have another amazing guest, and we're into our 2nd year now. So we have an abundance of amazing guests already waiting to come on. So make sure you hit the 2 websites below. It's the Star Development UK website, and you can find out a little bit more about Peter and the work that we're doing as well, and also the podcast website as well. So Peter, finally, thank you so much for your time.
It's been a pleasure, Stuart. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
And guys, I'll see you all next week. Take care. Bye.